It's all good. Do you usually make intros?
I think about what I'm going to say. Okay.
You ever watch a show called Clone High back in the day?
Yes, I
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that show.
The
Yeah,
ADD episode with Tom Green.
yeah. No.
Plastic bag, plastic bag.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today we are talking with Ben about um the Roman Empire and how it relates to today and
The
how it
legacy
relates,
of Rome. Yeah,
yes, and how we're still living in it. And
in
yeah,
many ways, yes.
it came up because when we first reconnected, you brought it up, and I was like, "Yo, this is what I've." Yeah, it's just really interesting. So it's going to be like a history lesson that relates to now with a hopeful message. And
Yes.
yeah, I guess the first question to ask about this. Oh, I will say anyone who's taking part in this. What's up, Uncle? What's up, Uncle? What's up, Kevin? How's everyone doing? You can ask questions whenever you want, and you can comment however you want. Please do.
Yeah, please do.
We're going to be having an ongoing conversation, but I will definitely get questions in and reply to stuff to break up the flow. So please be a part of the discussion. And if you want me to if you're inspired by anything and you have it reminds you of something, send it into the chat and I'll try to deal with that too. But we're talking about the legacy of Rome and Roman domination as it relates to cultures of colonization as it relates to now, right?
Yes. Yes.
Cool. So my first question to you, and after that you just take it how you want to take it, is
Sure, man.
how did you learn what you're about to drop on us? Like what brought you to this information?
Oh man, you know what? This is a great time to drop this bomb. I got interested in authoritarian societies and totalitarian societies at a very young age. So I grew up in my grandfather and I were super close when I was a kid, and he was a World War II veteran. So he fought for the Allies. And as I got into my teenage years, I discovered that my father's side of the family, so my bio dad bailed when I was a kid, so I don't really know my family on that side. I just know that they're really weird, really messed up, like dark. They tried to kidnap me when I was very young. Yeah. Anyway, so I don't want to get into that. That's not the point of the story. Anyway, I found out my German heritage is actually mostly Nazi sympathizers.
Word.
So yeah. So I got one side that's like kill the Jews, and I got the other side that fought against the Germans. And so I'm caught in this weird parallel, right? Where like, I'm in this nature versus nurture, um, collision, and I'm not sure where I stand. So I decided I want to understand how these societies grow and how they come to pass. So I
Okay.
started studying Nazi Germany, Stalinist Soviet Union, Mussolini and his rise in Italy. And as I study Mussolini, I realized that a lot of the stuff that he was doing was very much make America great again, except for Rome,
Yeah.
right? He was, and that's where the term fascist comes from. Actually, is the symbology was the fasces, which are like an axe with a bundle of sticks around it. If you look up fascism, like Italian fascism, that's the symbol you'll find.
I'm doing right now.
And yeah, please do. And the fasces were actually something that the patricians of Rome used to carry as a symbol of office. So this is like going back to the early stages of Rome. This is like a callback. This is very much make Rome great again kind of stuff. And that's how he came into power, was riding on this nostalgia. So of course, once that happens, I'm like, well, what the hell is he, banking on Rome for? I thought these guys, like the Roman Republic is sort of like glorified in history. So like, where did this come from? So I decided to do some research into that. And by the time that was done, I was like, holy, like these guys were not what I thought they were.
Which symbol are we looking at? Is it this
So
one?
yeah, the one right in the middle, the red, green, and white with the
This
eagle,
one?
that's a
Okay.
perfect one right there, man.
This one.
Yeah, so you got the fasces in the middle there, right? So that's the axe with the bundle of sticks around it. That's the symbol of patrician imperium, and that's a
Okay.
term we'll talk about in a second. And you got the eagle on the top, right? And the eagle is a huge symbol of empire in general. That's why the Nazis used it. That's why the Roman Empire used it. And I'm not speaking for other cultures, right? Like the eagle has symbology in every society that has eagles. You know what I mean?
100%. But this is how it was used in this instance.
Right, and also the reason why it was used as a symbol for America is very much along the same lines.
Yeah.
And the eagle was used by Britain at certain times, the lion and the eagle. It's been used a lot of different ways. Always connected to empire, though, when it comes to Europeans.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's a great one. That's perfect.
So, okay.
Anyway, so that was kind of my origins. I wanted to understand my own background, and I wanted to understand how people could go from a society that was educated and forward thinking and technologically advanced to this, these death camps and trains full of people that were just being transported to slave labor and, this monstrous machine of death. I just couldn't understand how you would get from one to the other in like 40 years. It was crazy to me. And so when I started studying that led me to Rome somehow. And that's where we are now, because I'm realizing that a lot of the things that made Rome so dominant for so long, because it pretty much ran the show for almost 1,000 years.
1,000 years?
Well, on and off, yeah.
Wow.
And it changed form and continued on its path. The Holy Roman Empire followed after that, and that lasted for another 800, maybe more than that. Yeah, so it's been going for a while.
And I remember you saying that, like, what's happening even in America now is still a continuation of that energy.
Yeah, so the founding fathers of America were modeling their new society, their new government off of the Roman Republic. The architecture in Washington, D.C. is all Roman. The concepts of liberty and how people were given that liberty and the ability to vote, that kind of like that. There it is. That's Capitol Hill, right? So that dome at the top, that's the Basilica. And the Basilica, you can find that. The St. Paul's Basilica is probably or St. Peter's Basilica is probably the most famous. That's in the Vatican. And the Vatican is a small city-state within Rome, right? So, and the arches and the white, the white coloring, it's all connected to the Roman architecture. Yeah, see right there, you can see another basilica right there in that Vatican picture.
Yeah.
So it's they weren't just trying to copy their culture; they were trying to copy their entire worldview.
Wow. Okay,
yeah.
So tell me about what was Rome's worldview for people who don't know.
Right.
Like how did they get down? What kind of lives were they living out here?
Okay, so the story of Rome is really complicated. So I'm going to try and just give some Cole's notes. But if people want to do further research, like Wikipedia has pretty much everything. And thank God for Wikipedia. Let me just put it that way, man. Because there's a lot of historians that just put a lot of really great information out there, and they cite sources, and you can just do your own thing. So Rome started as a kingdom, way back, like in the BC days, right? So I think it started. Let me see here if I don't have a specific. But it started it was a kingdom for probably a couple hundred years, and so there was a king, but they were elected, but they were elected for life. So that was the whole idea: is you find someone that's good at the job, you give them the job for the rest of their lives.
Like Putin.
Kind of, yeah. Except they didn't have to force the state to give them life. You know what I mean? It was just kind of part of the system, right? And also keep in mind that people lived in their 30s or 40s if they were lucky then, right? So electing someone for life wasn't into their 90s, not like now. So anyway, it started as a kingdom, but it was just a loose collection of tribes. So there was kind of 3 tribes, and then amongst those tribes there were 10 subcategories within those, and those kind of became the party system when the elections came up. So a king would be elected, they would rule for their life, and then when they died, there would be this period called an interregnum. And during that 5-day period, one of the senators, who is part of the patrician class were these noble families that kind of dominated the scene in politics, kind of ran the show. So for that 5-day interregnum, one of those senators would be given control of the kingdom. And they would search through all the people and try and find someone that would be a suitable replacement for the king.
Okay.
And then they would bring that to the Curia, which was these 30 tribes, 30 sub-tribes, and then those 30 sub-tribes would vote. And if if they chose the king, then they would be appointed the king, and they would have the job for life. And if they didn't, then there would be another 5-day interregnum, and another senator would be put in position, and that would carry on until they chose a king.
Okay.
So this went on.
This is the beginning. This is just looking for.
This is the very beginning, right? So that, like, hardly anything's happening. Rome's just a city at this point, and has this mythology around two brothers that established the city. Romulus was the first king, supposedly, and the kingdom didn't actually last very long, only like a couple hundred years. But they were like in a really good place environmentally.
Okay.
So they were on the ford of a river. So that's very powerful because it means you have fresh water source, and it also means that anybody that wants to cross the river has to go through your town. So they're probably going to have to pay a tax or a toll of some kind. So and also you're naturally going to meet other people, which means your culture is going to expand and develop, right? And you're going to create trade routes, that kind of stuff. So that's very powerful, especially early stages. They also had hills, so that meant highly defensible. So not only do you have to cross a river, but that's good. That's great.
Okay, so right now we're still here. We're still
So we're still 1,000 to 600. Yeah. So like now think about like 1,000 to 800 as like it's just a city. There's not much going on, but it's in a really great spot. And also throughout this period up until probably halfway through the Roman Empire, right? Okay. So like around 150, 200 AD, somewhere around there. The climate changes
here.
So this is something that most people don't talk about, but there was a little ice age in the Middle Ages.
What?
Yeah, in Europe. Okay. Like, I mean, it was the whole planet, but it severely affected Europe. And prior to this little ice age, Rome and the Mediterranean in general was really, really popping when it comes to agriculture. They had lots going on, and they didn't really have like a severe winter season, so they could kind of grow shit all the time. It was really like it just worked well in their favor. And so the Roman kingdom, ancient Rome, kind of started in this sort of hot zone, this magic moment in history, where they had a really great climate. They had these easily defensible hills, and they had a river ford, so that they could kind of dominate who came in and out, and deal with any sort of violent reprisal pretty quickly.
Okay.
So that's how things started. Now, these three tribes that kind of made up things, like the three main tribes that were split into 10, they were natural tribal groups that existed in the Italian peninsula at the time. So they were, let me see here, the Latins, the Sabines, and the Etruscans, and they each had their own spot. So it's very similar to any other tribal area in 1000 BC, right? So like all of Europe was just split up into these little tiny regions, and like that's where the Germanics and the Celts and the Picts and the Scots and the Danes and all that stuff. So like at that time, they're all around, but they're just like a few thousand, maybe, if you're lucky, you know what I mean? And then a famine comes in and they're wiped down to the last dozen, and then they got to work their way back up again. So not much is going on.
All right.
So at the end of this kingdom period, one of the kings decides that the people have too much power. This is going to be a common theme, right? So he reduces the amount of senators and consolidates power.
Okay.
All right. And he fragments the citizenry. So he splits them into 5 economic classes.
5 classes.
Yeah. Similar to what we've got now, right?
5 classes now?
Yeah. We've got the working class. We've got the homeless. We've got the middle class. We've got the upper class. And we've got the elite.
Okay. Working class. So basically, it's a homeless, right?
Yeah, homeless. Yeah. The underclass, you could call them.
Okay, working so underclass.
Yep.
Working class.
Yep.
Middle class.
Bingo.
This one is.
And then rich, upper class, which is like
rich but not too rich. Like you
call them middle management, right? They're making $200K a year, but they're not running shit.
I hear you. All right, and then there's Bezos.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Bezos, Gates, all those guys, right?
Okay. So there's and we still got those now. And okay, cool.
Kind of, right?
And how are they with the racism? Was there racism right now or not really?
So there was, but racism was like if you had a tribe and someone wasn't from your tribe, you didn't trust them by nature, because like, why would you, right? If they
Yeah.
don't speak your language and you can't communicate with them, you're going to assume that they're hostile.
But
So
that's not
like,
necessarily racism. That's just I don't trust you because I don't know you.
right. So it wasn't a systemic thing. We can
Okay.
say that. Like there wasn't a system that like, but at the same time, this political factionalization was based on your family in a lot of
Okay.
ways.
Okay.
Right. So that's sort of like proto-racism, you could call it, right? So it wasn't based on skin color, it wasn't based on any of that stuff,
Class.
but it was family.
Family.
So yeah, so like what family you came from determined your class in a lot of cases. That's where the patricians come in. So the
Okay.
patricians were kind of the ruling class that kind of ran shit. So there was these really wealthy noble families, and they tended to all be senators. And so when the king died, it's these same families that are getting to appoint the king. And so over several hundred years, who do you think they're going to pick? They're not going to pick the poor guy.
They're going to pick the guy who's going to take care of them.
Right. They're going to pick their cousin or their brother or their friend, right?
They could pick each other.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then they would give those to the curie, which was like everybody else. So anyway, this one king, whose name was let me see here. I got it here. Servius. So he splits them up into five groups. Now the people aren't into that. So things start getting messy. He's the seventh king. So this kingdom thing didn't last very long, right? And he's a violent asshole. So he does this power consolidation, and he starts breaking a lot of promises, and people start rising up, and he sends in the army to crush them, and that makes the violence, the uprising bigger, and eventually there's this giant revolution, and that's when the Republic is formed. Okay. So this happens. Do you have that timeline again?
Yeah.
You can throw up.
Man, I've been at that timeline's my.
Beautiful. Okay, so yeah, around 500 BC.
500 BC. That
around that time.
Here.
Yep.
Okay, we're here.
Right at the end of that king period. So that's when the Republic is established. So at this point, Greece is doing quite well.
Okay.
And they are the first democracy. Athens is kind of the first democracy, right? So the way Greece ran things is they had city-states. So each city is its own thing. It runs its own business. It handles its own army. It has its own region. Okay. And then they gotta deal with each other. So there's Athens, there's Sparta, there's Thessalonica, there's Macedonia, all this kind of stuff, right? And so the Republic of Rome is looking at what they're doing, and there's been some cross communication between them. They're trading at this point. They're on the Mediterranean together. They're going to cross boats, and so they're pretty friendly. And they're like, these guys, they kind of know what they're doing. So let's model our thing off the Greek city-state, but let's do it a little different. So that's when they established the Republic. So in the Republic, the cities ran themselves, and the politics within the cities was handled by the Senate. So if you want, so like you have a magistrate that kind of runs the people within a city and makes sure that the laws are upheld and that the economy is running well. But if you want to trade with another city, you talk to the Senate and you make sure that they communicate everything accordingly. So it has this sort of top-down approach to it, and that's the beginning of this thing.
Okay, so let me just take some questions from
Fire away, man.
Yeah. The first comment is there are some parallels between the rise to. Can you see the screen too?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
There are parallels between the rise to power of Saddam Hussein, Benito Mussolini, Hitler, and Trump.
I fully agree. Yeah.
What are some of those parallels, Kevin? You want to tell me what some of those are, or do you know what they are, Ben?
I mean, I can make some parallels.
Let's see what he's got.
Yeah, sure.
Kevin, give me that, and I'm gonna get back to you in 2 minutes.
Yeah. There's actually a parallel to Caesar as well, which we'll get to in a minute.
Okay. And then this is very interesting. Thank you. I think so too.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. How many people were there during the time of the kingdom? He's asking about population.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I mean, they didn't keep very good records during the kingdom. Most of the records started around the Republic. I do the census was kind of established in the late Republic, early Empire. So it's hard to tell.
No problem.
You'd have to. Yeah.
You don't know. Next question.
And it wasn't a focus when I was doing this stuff. So
revolution works. What do you?
It does. Yeah. Depends on what you want.
Violent revolution that we're talking about.
Um,
Was that revolution that you just told us about? Was that a peaceful revolution?
it was not peaceful.
No, it
No.
was okay. It makes changes. What did their revolution look like? So the change.
It's hard to say again because there's not a lot of like writing. So like a lot of this stuff was written retroactively when the Republic was in motion. Some of the older people that had survived the revolution started writing some shit down, and that
Okay.
survived.
Okay.
But it was basically just like the Curie had had enough, and they grabbed their torches and pitchforks, and they marched on Rome, and were like, "We've had enough."
Okay. So
Um,
let's approach this information from a different angle.
sure.
What are some parallels between now and then? And maybe you'll
Sure.
pick a big topic, and then you'll talk about
Well,
parallel because
yeah, totally. So I want to connect this to America specifically because America is sort of the Rome of now, right?
That's right.
So I would say that ancient Rome is very similar to the 13 colonies prior to the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution, right? You got these cities that are kind of running their own business, but they have to kowtow to this one monarch. And eventually this monarch decides that he's had enough, and he starts like reorganizing things and taxing people unfairly and having representatives that don't have the best interests of the people. And so people start whispering amongst themselves, and the next thing you know, they grab some muskets and they're like, you know what, we've had enough, we want to start our own government. That's basically a very similar process that happened.
So now you're talking about the King of England versus the American settlers, right? And the founding of
Right.
America. That's what you're talking about.
Right.
Cool. I'm with
Yeah.
you. I'm with you. Okay.
So it's like sort of like monarchies can only last so long before the monarch gets out of hand because they don't appreciate what they've got, and the people rise up, and the result is a transformation of government. That's kind of a modern theme, but it stretches back to obviously like thousands of years ago, as we're seeing, right?
Okay. And so what about the parallels between Rome and slavery?
Well, Rome had slaves. But I mean, they weren't unique in that. There were a lot of like Egypt had slaves. You know, that's a lot of the stories of the early Bible were about that stuff, right? The Jews were basically slaves, and you know that they weren't alone in that either. Nubia was known for having slaves.
Okay. But was the Roman type different, or I know not?
I wouldn't say so.
Not
I
every
mean,
type was the same. That's what I heard.
yeah, I understand what you're saying. So like, American slavery was very unique. I can say that because it was based on race, and that was not common up until America. But their slavery was more based on like if you won like a war against a group of people, you would take them prisoner, and then they would be slaves. But there was a process to be freed in Roman society, but it was kind of dependent on your owner. So like it didn't happen often.
Okay.
There is one story of a Greek. The Greeks had slaves as well. There was one story of a Greek philosopher who was freed as a slave. His name was Epictetus, and he's kind of one of my favorite dudes. Born and raised into slavery, and then his owner freed him, and then he decided to start a philosophical school.
Okay.
And the school he started was Stoicism.
Oh, okay.
And Stoicism was actually one of the Roman emperors. Right. He was a Roman emperor.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was a huge proponent of Stoicism. And I would say Marcus Aurelius is the reason why we know about Stoicism now, because Meditations is a brilliant book. Anybody who hasn't read Meditations, it's worth it.
It's Barzy.
Yeah. Yeah. He knew his shit, man. He was an educated guy.
Okay.
So anyway, during the Republic, they kind of reset things. So rather than having someone run the show on their own for life, they set it up where there were two people that ran things called consuls. So the one big change though was that the people no longer voted for them. It was the patricians that determined who was in charge.
And the patricians are rich.
That's right. They're the wealthy people.
Okay.
And there's only a few families that are patricians, right? So this is the establishment of Europe's first military superpower. So the Republic was very much a military organized thing. And this is because of the revolution, right? And this is a huge parallel to America. Think about America stepping in, and what is the Second Amendment? So you got the first two amendments are we are free and we got guns.
That's
right?
true.
Yeah, so it's the
Okay.
establishment of a militaristic society, and I'm not casting aspersions on it. I think there are lots of reasons why you should be able to defend yourself. I'm not anti-gun necessarily,
Cool.
but you have that as your Second Amendment. You're making your priorities quite clear. That's all I'm saying.
Here's a comment that I like. Keeping it in the
Thanks, man.
family, breaking
Oh yeah,
promises, and attacking the people. Sound familiar?
bingo. This is a common theme.
Okay, just keep
Um,
understanding you.
right. Because they're very militaristic, they kind of have a state of perpetual war going on throughout the entire republic.
And isn't that a
So
fair energy? The pop like it's like that opposition. I'm always at war. Isn't doesn't that create like a fear energy in the people?
yeah, well, I think it creates a combination. So like it's a fear energy, but it's also an aggression and a dominance and a like an ego energy, right?
Okay.
So the two kind of play at each other. So I don't think they were especially during the Republic. I don't think they were necessarily afraid of their opposition. I
Mhm.
think because of this concept of imperium. So
Okay.
imperium started in the kingdom, and this was the idea. Was like I have imperium over my house
Okay. So
and
what
my
does
family.
Imperium mean? This
So it's
word.
dominance or like authority. So it's the beginning of a top-down approach, I would say.
Okay. So this is high. This is hierarchical, power
Yes.
based domination
Right,
stuff.
exactly. So, like a
Okay.
general would have imperium over their army,
Mm.
but the king would have imperium over the general,
Okay.
and the sergeants would have imperium over their squadrons. Squadrons would have imperium over their families, and it's just sort of this pyramid scheme all the way down,
Is there a
right?
gender aspect to this too?
I mean, it was definitely a male-dominated society.
Okay.
I
Okay.
would say it was it's fundamentally a patriarchy. There were no female uh, rulers in the entirety of Roman existence.
Okay. So it's a hierarchical, militaristic,
Patriarch,
patriarchal society.
for sure. Yes.
Mm. Okay.
Um, and that's I think the militarism and the patriarchy are intertwined. Dudes are
Mm.
wired that way in a lot of ways. So
Right.
that's something that's going to become more and again, like the concept of imperium means not only is the man in charge, but that the woman is not. That's a very important thing to understand. Is like the female in the family or in the household is beholden to the man. So it's not just that the man is in charge; it's that the man is like
Property.
the dominator. Yeah,
Okay.
right. So like women aren't necessarily property. It's not like explicit like that in the law. Slaves are property for sure. But the big thing is the men are running the show.
How?
And
Go ahead,
what
finish
do you
your
mean
answer.
how?
No, I was gonna say, how do you feel that this
Hmm.
idea of imperium causes like negative? Like, what's bad about it? Like, what's dangerous about it?
So I think it's an ego stroking thing, and I think if you don't have a balance on your ego, then it will run wild, and that's what happened to Servius, the king. Right? Was like he didn't think anything could happen because he'd never seen anything happen to his predecessors, and so he thought he would just take more power, and it blew back.
Okay.
Um, and that's what Imperium does: is it gets you cocky. So
Okay.
we'll get into that again in a minute. So the Republic was very militaristic
Hmm.
and it expanded its territory. So it pretty much took over most of the Mediterranean. And around this time, during this period, was when the Macedonian Empire collapsed, which is another parallel. So Alexander the Great, this dude comes out of nowhere, uh, gets a big army together, and starts just cutting a swath through the northern and eastern Mediterranean.
Hmm.
Gets all the way to India, dies, and like just all of a sudden in the midst of a military campaign, he's just dead. And so all of his generals, they want a piece of the pie, but they want to run the show. And so it starts this giant civil war. Now, for any other like cultural power in the area, this is a huge opportunity because they're all fighting each other for something that no longer exists, right?
Okay.
So Rome steps in and starts taking pieces away, and they start like moving in and dominating, and people in Macedonian culture, like they're kind of done with this war thing, and the Romans are coming in, killing the army, and saying, "Don't worry, we're gonna set things up our way. We have a republic. you'll be a person of Rome. You'll be a citizen if you play your cards right. All this probably sounds pretty sweet. So people are kind of like joining the Republic and getting comfortable with the new culture. Okay, this kind of spreads the Imperium sentiment throughout the society.
So, because you're saying these ideas of domination and hierarchy are now not just spreading; they're spreading amongst everybody that they're in contact with or dealing with.
That's right. That's right. And any place that has a lot of strife and a lot of chaos, they're going to want to grab onto the one solid thing that they can find. And
this is why
Rome is that thing.
In times of economic strife, people tend to vote more conservative.
Exactly. Right. So it's part of our psychology, right? So with these extra resources and extra land, now they have bigger armies, they have more agriculture. They're starting to get cocky. And so they've had this war with a place called Carthage for a good long time. And so they send their armies over. This is Tunisia, so northern Africa. So they send their armies over to Carthage. This is probably the third time they fought them, I think. And they annihilate them completely and salt the earth so that nothing can grow there.
The Rome wins a war and salts the earth.
That's right.
That's kind of like nuking it.
Pretty much. It's the nuke of the classical era, I would say. Yeah. It's dark. Like, you don't do that to people. You know what I mean?
Or the earth.
You might. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Like, because you can use that earth. What are you doing? Like, you have to really hate people to do something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, you don't even want it. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? So anyway, this expansion is starting to kind of crumble things along the edges of the Republic, right? They can't hold all this together. There's too much going on, and only 2 consuls and a bunch of senators in a city. Like, how are they supposed to keep track of all this stuff?
So you're saying that the population is too big for the people to be like managed as it is,
right? Yeah. There's too much power in the hands of too few people, and so the chaos is spreading rapidly. So now, like, obviously the Republic, I'm condensing a really fairly large period of time. So, like, please read up on this. There's so much fascinating information about how it fell apart. But the collapse starts happening. And so you have slave revolts, right? So people have had enough and they're tired of being treated like shit. And so they start grouping up. Now, this doesn't work very well because the slaves don't have any military background and they don't have any weaponry. So most of the time, the military trained people that are now citizens of Rome, because that was one of the deals, is if you join the army and you fight a campaign, you can come back and you're a citizen. Very similar to how things are in America.
Yeah,
right?
You join the army, will give you anything you want.
Bingo, right? So again, another parallel. Like, they're modeling their society very similarly to Rome. So you got these military trained citizens, and when the slaves rise up, they don't know what they're doing. They're just angry, right? And so they just start torching shit and causing trouble and saying, we're not going to lift those rocks anymore. And so a bunch of them get killed, and the rest of them are sort of, cowed into returning to their job. And this happens a couple times until this dude Spartacus comes along. And I'm sure we've all heard of Spartacus. Yeah. So he was a gladiator from Thrace. Thrace is basically where Afghanistan is now.
Word.
So the Thracians were horse warriors, and they're fucking hardcore. They know how to fight. Yeah. They were horse archers. So they were sort of like early stage Mongolians. A lot of cultural, like, trading and cultural mingling happening during the classical era. So the Thracians are a force to be reckoned with, and Spartacus is not his actual name; it's just the name the Romans gave him. I don't actually know what his real name is, but he was captured during one of these Roman campaigns of expansion, and his family's killed, and he's taken as a slave. And they're like, this guy knows how to fight because he killed a whole bunch of us. We should make him a gladiator, see how he does in the ring. So they give him some weapons, they put him in the gladiator arena, and he crushes. So around this time is decadence is at a high. So the rich patrician class are just living high on the hog. They don't really have anything to worry about. All these resources and stuff are just kind of coming into the city. They don't have to do much to earn it. And so they're getting cocky.
Where are we at in terms of like inequality? So there are people who are really rich.
Yeah,
people
well,
who are
inequality is
being
getting
poor.
worse and worse.
Okay, so the wage gap in the is getting
Well,
more extreme.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't the same. Like, wages aren't quite the same then as they are now. Like, if you owned land, you would have to give a percentage of it to the republic, and in return, they would give you roads, they would give you a magistrate, they would, like,
Okay.
keep the borders protected against bandits
Yeah.
and
Okay.
troublemakers. So that's kind of what you're paying for the most part.
Okay.
Um, and the Roman military is extremely well trained. So like you're not paying for nothing. Like they do a good job, right?
Okay.
Um,
Let me ask you
but
some questions. Can I ask you
shoot,
because we still got to get to the Hegelian dialectic, right?
we do.
So I'm gonna ask you to talk to me about where you see America is now as it relates to its fall and its crumbling.
Yeah. Okay.
And those themes that are at present in Rome's also fall.
Right. So we are literally at the Spartacus period
Okay.
in American history. So America is a republic, right? They vote for their leaders. They have a Senate. They have a Congress. Congress is similar to the plebeians of the Roman period. So there's a lot of parallels. Now, one of the things that happens around the Spartacus period, the reason why he's so successful is the celebrity culture begins at the tail end of the Republic.
Okay.
So because the Colosseum is so big, and you know the term bread and circuses?
Tell me about it.
Okay, so the term bread and circuses comes from the Roman Republic. The idea was to give the poor bread. So what they would do every day is they would throw bread out on the steps of the Senate, and the poor would pick it up. And this was considered like a tribute to the Roman people. But it was just a
Okay.
way of keeping them complacent.
Yeah. And
Right?
circuses, what's that, like entertainment?
So a circus is a chariot race,
Okay.
right?
Like
So
Ben-Hur.
they would have, so it's just basically games, right?
Yeah.
So like they'd have chariot races, they'd have duels to the death, which is the gladiators. They would have them fight against lions and bears and all sorts of exotic animals that they would get from other places because everything's coming in to give to the Republic.
Mhm.
And so everybody that's living in Rome that is already rich and part of a wealthy family, they don't give a fuck. They're doing fine, right?
Okay.
They have no stresses. And so the public are coming into the Colosseum to try and get away from their misery and their frustration because things aren't working out very well for them, and it's getting harder and harder by the day. So they're trying to find distractions. They're going to the gladiator arena and they're watching these guys fight. And Spartacus is crushing it. And so he's getting this really big name for himself. People are talking about him all the time. And then this guy starts getting some of the other gladiators to talk about, we should revolt, man. Like, we can fight. These guys don't know how to fight at all. There you go. Who started taking the knee? Colin Kaepernick. And what happened with Kaepernick is almost exactly what happened with Spartacus. This guy starts talking about freedom and the mistreatment of peoples and how the Republic has lost its way and all these common themes that we're seeing now. And the people were split in two. The wealthy upper classes were saying this upstart doesn't know what he's talking about. The Republic is beautiful. Look at all the great things we have. And the poor are like, man, he's got a point, especially the slaves, right? Now, obviously, Rome wasn't drawn on racial lines in the same way, although there was, if you're a Roman citizen, you're a person. And if you're not a Roman citizen, you're basically not a person.
Not a person? Okay.
Basically not. You can't vote. You can't own property, right? You would gain citizenry by becoming like a soldier or by being freed from slavery by your owner. So those are basically the ways. And even if you were freed from slavery, it was only your children that could actually be citizens. You could never be one yourself.
Not being able to vote, that's like that thing that they do in America where they what's it called?
Voter suppression or gerrymandering.
Gerrymandering and all that other stuff.
Yeah,
they go out of their way to like disenfranchise a lot of votes that they don't think are going to go their way. And
that's right.
The not owning property thing to me reminds me of the way that people who survive slavery don't have any family income. All they have is wages.
Well, yes. Now we're getting to the good part, man. So this is, and I want to add another little layer to this. So do you know what Moore's law is?
Talk to me.
Okay, Moore's law is something that a technologist came up with. He was basically like, every every period in technological achievement, things get smaller and faster, and smaller and faster. And the curve is like this, right? It's a straight up curve, like it's exponential growth.
Yeah.
Time and culture have the same thing. So what took hundreds of years or thousands of years to happen in prehistory is now happening at a much faster rate in the modern age, mostly because of technology. So they're interconnected. But the point I'm trying to make is, what you might look at this and be like, well, it took 600 years for the Roman Empire to fall. Well, yeah, it did, but things happen much faster now. So keep that in mind. So around the time that this Roman Kaepernick is starting to cause shit, he starts a slave revolt, and this one's almost successful. They really do some damage, and they mess with a large swath of Italy. They're on their way to Rome. Okay, and this is the first time that they've ever got this kind of movement. But Spartacus and his boys, they know how to fight, and they're kind of training people, and they're getting a bigger army all the time. So the rich are the only people that can save the day, because they're the only ones that can afford a military. So this guy named Crassus shows up. So there's a bunch of frontier wars going on. There's a guy named Julius Caesar that's doing some stuff. There's another guy that's named what's his name? Pompey, who's doing some shit too, right? So these are kind of like the celebrities of the military, right?
Okay.
And Crassus is a really wealthy banker guy. He's got a lot of cash. Doesn't really know how to fight though. So he buys a giant army and crushes Spartacus and his slave revolt. They're done. But this has kind of stoked the fires of political change in the society. So now there's these three warlords that are all kind of jockeying for position to run the show in the Republic. But they don't want to be voted in. They want to run it. And they're military. So they're like locked into this imperium mentality. They've been expanding their territory and taking over larger and larger places in Europe over their lifetime. And now they want to just run Rome because they think they deserve it, because that's how imperium works.
So who are the parallels for that now? What do you see?
Oh, man. Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Say more.
Well, I mean, why did Clinton win the DNC?
She stole it from Bernie.
How?
I don't know.
She had the entire Democratic Party eaten out of her hand because she said she deserved that job. She didn't think she had to earn it, right? She didn't think she had to earn the people's votes.
I'm listening. Is it?
She thought, so Bernie had the better campaign. He had more people at his back, but the political system was geared towards someone in power staying in power.
Okay.
Right? So Clinton capitalized on that, and she corrupted the National Committee and basically pushed Sanders out of the ticket.
But don't you think they were already corrupt though? And like if Bernie came in, he would have changed society in a way, and the rich would be less rich. And you said before that the Senate or whoever they were, that group, they were into electing kings that were going to benefit them, right? So if I'm ruling class, if I'm Bezos, I'm not trying to hear Bernie saying nothing to me. Hillary's going to be busy as usual, right?
That's right. Yeah, and Sanders was riding a wave, right? So like Sanders came in. Like, let's keep in mind that what Kaepernick did was touch on something that had been around for a very long time. Sanders did the same thing. The only difference between Sanders and Kaepernick is Sanders had street cred because he ran with MLK,
and
right?
He was like an elected official for years.
That's right, and so he had receipts. He could show that he was running things in an ethical way.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas Kaepernick was just a football player. So he, like, as much as what he stood for was valid, and I do believe that he made an impact on highlighting some of the injustices in America. He didn't really have a plan after he took the knee.
No,
there wasn't like a political platform that he was pursuing. You know what I mean? No. Whereas Sanders was like, "Let's go, it's time." You know what I mean? So he rode the wave.
They took Sanders down, right? So you're saying because you said there was three like rulers who were trying to come up.
Three warlords, yeah.
And you're saying that one of them was Trump, one of them is Hillary.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say that there was a third in the American context because they have a two-party system. So like the difference would be that the Roman Republic was very militaristic, and whereas America is very militaristic, their leaders are not military, right? It's basically since
But
I
what about
guess
what's that guy's
Eisenhower
name?
was the last military guy that ran the show as a president.
Is this conspiratorial if I say that one of the leaders behind America has been Bush Senior, and he was kind of military because he was CIA,
He
right?
ran CIA. Yeah.
So he's not a peaceful dude. And then after
Nope.
him, it was Cheney. And even though Cheney wasn't on top of the figurehead, Cheney was behind the scenes for a minute, like
Sure.
for a lot. So like they weren't military. You know what I'm saying?
I would say, yeah, I know what you're saying. I think there's a difference between a warmonger and a warrior, right?
Okay.
So like,
So you would say that Cheney was a warmonger?
Cheney was absolutely a warmonger, but he wasn't a military guy. He didn't know how to fight a war. He knew how to capitalize on war itself.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So like, he wouldn't be in the trenches. He wouldn't be making strategies.
But the game's
He'd be
changed
waiting
now.
for things to get messy, and then he'd come in and take all the resources.
I hear you, but I'm saying like the game has changed now. Like if you're plotting
Sure.
on war, even if you ain't on the front lines,
Yep.
I still consider you a warrior because that's where your intent is.
For sure. I would say Cheney is more of like a Crassus, right? So like Julius Caesar knew how to fight. And what was the other guy's name? I can't remember. Third dude. Pompey. Pompey knew how to fight. Those guys were generals. They had armies. They had the loyalty of their military. Those guys would fight and die for these dudes. Okay. Crassus is just a rich guy. He just paid for an army, and you know, like ended up being one of the bosses in town.
Okay, let me ask you another question because the time is getting tight on us.
Sure.
What are some lessons that we can apply or some wisdom that you've gained as it relates to our current situation and America falling or whatever that you've gained from studying Roman history?
Okay, well, here's the final stage. So we got these three warlords. They're all jockeying for position, and Caesar ends up winning the show. It's complicated. I don't want to get into the details. If you want the details, you can look it up yourself. But Caesar ends up declaring himself dictator.
Okay.
Right. So he is given senatorial authority to veto the Senate, and he's given the power to appoint and throw out senators. That's so he could basically decide who's in charge.
Yeah. So he's Putin.
Yeah, kind of. He only has that power for 4 years before he's assassinated by a conspiracy of senators who are like, this guy is trouble. Let's get him the hell out of here.
Okay.
So he gets assassinated. The next step is what's important, and this is the parallel to America today. So we kind of have a Julius Caesar in position right now.
Trump.
We're looking at General Caesar before he becomes Emperor Caesar. You know what I mean?
Because Trump might not give up power. Is that what you're saying?
Trump might cross the Rubicon. The term crossing the Rubicon, which is a fairly common term in politics, is historical reference to Caesar's army crossing the river and taking Rome.
I'm saying, all right, this democracy thing's over. I'm doing me now.
Yup.
Okay.
So if Trump figuratively crosses the Rubicon and becomes the dictator, we have a problem, because Caesar wasn't emperor for more than 4 years before he was killed. The civil war that followed turned the Roman Republic into an empire.
Well, so you're saying if Trump goes Caesar and says he's not into no election,
he won't last 5 minutes.
Do you think he'll be assassinated?
I don't think he'll be. I think he'll choke on something. He's barely able to run a sentence together. He's not leadership material. He can't run an army.
So
he can't. He can barely run his own tweets.
So you don't think Trump's gonna make it to another term?
I think he has a lot of people that want to control America that are using him as a pawn. And I think he's both aware of it and too narcissistic to believe that they can succeed at controlling him.
So these forces behind Trump that are running America quietly through the chaos, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
What do they want? What are they dealing with?
I think they want to run things themselves. I think they're working together because it's convenient.
Okay.
But when look, Trump is a hand grenade, right? You don't go in the room with the hand grenade. You throw it in and you wait. And then when it goes off, you clean up. That's what I think is happening. And that's what happened in Rome. when Caesar died, there was a split in the Senate, and it caused a civil war across the entire republic. Now, the republic is gigantic at this point, right? Very similar to what America is right now. America is not just the continental United States. It's got, and I've been saying this for years, and people need to start thinking about this. They have military bases in 100+ countries.
What do you mean?
They have military bases all over the world. I think there's 130 countries that they have military establishment in.
But how big?
So they're garrisoned.
But those bases, like how many soldiers you got? That could. So there's.
Well, I don't know, man.
Is there a base in like the Philippines? Is there a base in Jamaica?
There's definitely a base in the Philippines.
Okay.
I don't know if there's one in Jamaica. There's one in most South American countries. There's one in almost every European country.
What purpose?
Especially across the borders of Russia. They got a foothold in the Middle East. They got a foothold in Afghanistan.
Okay.
They got various places in Africa that they got a foothold. And this is the thing you got to keep in mind. Those guys, they work for America as long as they get paid.
Okay.
As soon as those checks stop coming, we don't have American military anymore. We have warlords with guns.
That's not going to be good.
Not good. And those guns fire whether you're American or not.
That's
right.
True.
And that's what I'm worried about. So I'm worried that Trump causes some shit, ends up creating a civil war, and we have bigger problems because the world has an American military that can't handle its own shit.
And that's going to be messy. Okay, so I asked Kevin a long time ago about the parallels between Trump, Saddam, Hitler, Mussolini, and he says disinformation, denying real news, military dominance, propaganda, pitting groups of people against each other, like immigration and all that other stuff, blaming groups for the problem of the state, are things used by dictators.
100%.
Okay, so we had 3 points before we started when we talked. The first point was the empire has changed names and languages, but is the same structure. And now when you say this, I'm realizing you actually also meant like politically with the Senate and the like you meant like even the political structure.
Yep.
I was thinking also in terms of the like spiritual or energetic structure of like dominance and not respecting the earth and things like that. Like And
yeah. So when the Roman Empire started after that civil war, basically Caesar's son takes over, right? And the following 4 emperors are Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, and they almost destroy the whole thing. And they deforest almost all of Italy.
Deforest.
Yeah.
Like what we're doing. Yeah. Okay. So here's what my people are saying. They're saying this sounds terrifying. The other person says, "Is there a solution?"
Yeah, there is.
So that's what we need to let's put a little sunshine on this.
Absolutely. So the solution is creating an organized community that doesn't need the empire.
Self-sufficiency.
Yes. Not well. See, I hate to do this, man, but the concept of self-sufficiency is built in with Imperium.
I'm listening.
No man is an island.
Okay, keep talking.
We have to create a community that can rely on each other.
Okay.
Right?
So I meant like a self-sufficient community.
Sure, I understand. But even then, we got to count on our neighbors.
Okay.
Right? And like our community has to trust the other communities around us to kind of do the right thing, right?
So you're talking about building local connections.
So and this is a great chance to get into the Hegelian dialectic, right?
Yes.
So
talk about it.
Okay, so Hegel was this German philosopher, right? And he was sort of the progenitor of Marxism in a lot of ways. Okay, because Marx kind of took his ideas and turned them into class.
Yeah.
But his whole idea was that history follows a certain trend. So there is an agenda, which is a consolidation of power, which leads to a thesis, which is basically the mode or the philosophy or ideology that political force stands on. Of course, that can't last forever before there's an antithesis or some opposition force that has an alternate perspective on how things should be done. The two have a conflict, and out of that conflict something new comes out, the synthesis, which is usually a piece of each thesis and antithesis kind of combined together. America is a great example of this, right? So you have Rome, thesis, antithesis. Synthesis is the Republic. Thesis, antithesis is the Empire. The Empire falls, fragments into the Dark Ages, and then you have multiple theses and antitheses kind of fighting against each other, and they consolidate into something new, which is the Holy Roman Empire, which is a combination of Rome and the Catholic sort of ideology combined together.
So what is the thesis antithesis now?
I think it's the same one that of the past. So I think we're facing another fight against an empire. And yes, and the part of the story of the Roman Empire that gets ignored by most history classes is all the other tribes and groups that were fighting against Rome throughout the entirety of its existence. So there's a reason why Germany speaks a completely different language than the rest of Western Europe. And it's because the Germans were never conquered by the Romans. So their grammar's different, their linguistics are different, the root of their culture is different. And that stands the test of time. Now, over history, they have mingled and they've become part of things in a different way, right? Mostly when they were Christianized. That was when things became a little more in line with what was. But now, here's the thing. Now we have a whole planet and everyone's accounted for. There's no new humans, right?
Okay.
We've been all the places.
Yeah, and okay.
So we're all here. So there's no new discoveries on the planet Earth. We've got all the humans in place.
All right.
So now we can actually build something.
How?
Do you know what I mean?
No.
So this fragmentary stuff that has been causing conflict and causing these thesis antithesis.
You're saying we can unite.
I think the new synthesis is we start looking at things through a human lens, not just a regional lens.
Okay.
And start realizing that the butterfly that flaps its wings here in Toronto causes hurricanes over in Croatia.
You know what I mean? Group.
We can start working together a little more. And this communication that we have right now, this is a perfect example. I mean, how many different people are listening to this and commenting on this and stuff from all different places?
I believe 10.
Okay. So it's a little small. That's fine.
No, I mean, 10 is a lot. What
start.
You mean? In my house? Start. 10 in this house?
Yeah, sure. True enough.
I'm just mad. No, but are you saying the internet is a way to build community?
I think it's a tool for sure. Okay. I think it's a powerful tool. And I think just the fact that we found all the people, there's no one coming up from behind us anymore. There's no reason to mistrust our neighbor. Like, I think the one common thread that we've discovered in the 21st century, just in the last 20 years, is that there's not much different between us. We have a lot more in common than we think. So this divide and conquer shit, it's not going to work so well no more if we start communicating with each other. I think the reason it's been so successful right now is because if you look at the way that social media is geared, it still follows the rule of Imperium, right?
What do you mean?
Zuckerberg decides what stays on and off Facebook.
Oh yeah, that's his platform.
Right. Jack Dorsey decides what stays on and off Twitter.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So then would you say they're like senators?
Well, I think we need to start talking about whether or not social media is a company or a public forum, right? Like, who owns Dundas Square?
I bet you someone does.
Cadillac Fairview does.
In Toronto, right?
Yeah. Now imagine 10,000 people are in Dundas Square. Now who owns Dundas Square?
I mean, you're going to say we do. You're saying we could take it back.
Well, I don't think Cadillac Fairview has enough resources to take out 10,000 people all at once.
Unless they call the army.
Well, yeah, but they're not the army. I mean, they're just a company, right?
You're saying we outnumber the evil.
I'm saying that we outnumber everybody.
We do. So we just need to expand our we.
That's right. We need to find what the we is, I think. I think that's what I'm trying to say, is like, there is a we here. We spend a lot of time on the I and the you.
And that's Imperium.
Right. And we need to focus on the we a little more.
Okay. And how did Rome or Roman descendants deal with groups that approach them as we? Is there any historical precedence to the we being able to
It's hard
turn
to
the
say.
tide?
The unfortunate reality of Roman history is that it was written by Romans.
That's deep.
So we don't really know how other cultures were. Like the term barbarian is actually barbarianus, which is Latin for, because every time they met people from a particular region, their language sounded like bar 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 bar. So they called them barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
It was a term. It was like the N word.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They were just making fun of their culture.
Here's a quote that I got. Until the lion learns to tell his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
That's correct.
Right. So
absolutely.
I think it's important to tell your own stories.
Yeah.
Okay, check some more comments. We got this one. Community is the only way out.
Yes.
That's big.
I think it's the way in.
That's deep.
Yeah.
I'm buying that. I'm buying both of what you're selling.
Yeah, it's the way out of something, but the way into something else, right?
You dropped the remix. I'm buying both albums. Okay. It's cool, enough. Man. We're solid. Exactly. Authentic of universal human rights values. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you're talking about inclusion. You're talking about inclusion as the way out of this.
Yeah, and let me add another silver lining here, if I can.
Sure, baby.
So we talk a lot about the evils of America, and there are a lot of evils, man. There's a lot to disagree with and a lot to critique. But let's also understand that the American establishment was a synthesis of some really evil stuff and some better values that have literally transformed the way that we see the world. Okay, they were one of the first legitimate democracies, and that democracy system has spread across the entire planet for the most part, with minor exceptions.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know how democratic America is really, you know.
I'm talking about the ideals, right?
The ideals are nice. Okay, so
the ideals are nice.
They inherited, or they carried forward a lot of colonial energy, right? And that was related to the monarchy and related to slavery, related to all of that other stuff.
That's right.
But you're saying they also had some ideas about freedom and human rights and all this other stuff.
They were still an evolution of the broken shit that they had left Europe with.
Okay, so this is a conversation about like the people who left Europe and their values, and even the people who sent them. You're saying those values were
but it was also a synthesis. So they took a lot of really broken ideas from Europe, they brought them here, and some of them were synthesized with ideas from the first people, with the First Nation.
Wow.
The American Constitution is modeled after several constitutions within native cultures.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Iroquois Confederacy, which I'm not sure that's the correct term. It's really muddy because white people write the history, so it's hard to say, right? But the term that we use commonly in history is the Iroquois Confederacy was a group of native tribes and peoples, nations, who had joined together in peace, and their social rules and norms were the model of the American Constitution.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
In a lot of ways.
That's going to be an episode.
And the irony of the words of the Constitution and the fact that they still had slaves was not lost on the people of the 18th century. That's something to keep in mind. People understood how hypocritical they were even back then.
They didn't care.
Well, Britain had already abolished slavery by that point.
I heard, and I want to show a video, that America one of the reasons why the founding fathers rebelled against Britain was because they wanted to have control over their slaves. And
one of the big reasons,
because they didn't want Britain in their money. It wasn't about human rights. It was about being subject to Britain and paying taxes and the slaves.
It was taxation. It was taxation.
But that's that's not human rights.
The main slogan of the American Revolution was not liberty or death. It was no taxation without representation. So they were basically like, if you're going to tax me, I want to look you in the eye. That was all.
Okay.
The whole thing was fought over. I don't want to give my money to Britain when I need it here. That was it.
Okay. So Kevin says, yes, the native Constitution is a significant part of the American Constitution. Okay.
The concept of confederation comes from them as well. And the confederation, like Canada is a confederation.
It's different like groups working together for the same like is that
Right. Different cultures who are like, do you know what the two row philosophy is?
yeah.
Right. So that was the model for Canadian Confederacy.
So we just need to get our North American nations to stop being hypocritical.
But I think personally, I think the issue is that we talk a lot about theory and we haven't put shit into practice. And
Okay.
like we have the capacity with the technology we have now, we have the capacity to put it in practice. We had excuses before that were fairly justified for doing some awful shit. Um,
I
uh,
mean,
I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I wasn't there, right?
they're justified. So I was like, justified? But I hear you. I hear you. I'm letting it rock.
They felt justified, is all I'm saying.
All right. I hear you.
But the shine is off. I mean,
Yeah.
it you can't pretend anymore.
I
You know,
think
like
COVID forced us at home. And that was like you said, they dropped bread and circus.
mm,
COVID was like, all right, well, what happens if the bread and circus pause for a minute? And
yep,
people were like, all right, you know what? This ain't working.
that's right. Yeah, it's easy to keep yourself distracted until you have to look in the mirror all the time and you can't go out.
Mm,
And I think we're doing a lot of soul searching. Well, some of us are. Some of us are really not handling it well, and
no. So
that's coming
we're
to full force in America right now.
we're over time. You said here, despite the pernicious and ever, you said, okay, I didn't read everything down, but you talked about the ever presence of survival and liberty. You were saying, despite the
Yeah.
energy of oppression and the will for some people to want to dominate being around a lot, there's also an energy of liberty. And I wanted to
Yeah.
give you a chance to talk about that before we
Well,
go.
I think the core of the Hegelian dialectic, what he keeps talking about, thesis, antithesis, synthesis, is empire, liberty, boom, new form of government every
Okay.
time.
So,
So as long as people are trying to dominate, there will be
mhm,
people who are trying to liberate.
okay.
And the difference between the two is that the people who are working towards liberation uh, don't want to destroy the people who want to dominate. They just want them out of the way,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
Um,
How does that work?
well, I think we have both of those capacities inside us, and it's environmental in a lot of ways. I don't think it's purely environmental, but I think it's a big factor in which one we sort of identify with.
Okay.
You know
Okay.
that, and
Okay.
that's why I started getting into the study of this, was because I knew that predisposition was inside me, because my one half of my family were awful people,
So
just
how
awful.
and so you worked that out by choice? Like you decided, even though this is inside me, I can choose who I want to be, or how did you resolve that tension in
I
yourself?
Well, I wanted to understand it so that when those tendencies would rise up in me, I would know what to do about them. I think one of the things that our culture does unsuccessfully is keep us from looking at our shadow.
Wow. So you
And
look at it, you face your shadow.
you got to integrate that thing, man. Like
Deep. That's deep.
I have regular conversations with my dark side.
That's
Um,
deep.
and I think I heard something really deep said a long time ago, and it sticks with me to this day. The difference between a good person and an innocent person is that a good person chooses to do right when they know how to do evil. An innocent person has never experienced evil, so everything they do is justified.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So if you really want to be a good person, if you really want to choose good, you have to understand your capacity for evil. You have to know that, and that was what I was trying to grapple with when I was young, when I was studying this stuff, was if my parents or my grandparents particularly could be Nazis, well, they're just people to me, right? They're not monsters, because
Okay.
I'm the reason,
Yeah.
I'm here because of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They're your family.
right, exactly. So I want to understand who they are and where they come from, so that if those circumstances present themselves again, I'll have a sort of defense mechanism. It's very similar to like the anti-fragile sort of approach to childbearing or child rearing.
What's anti-fragile?
So kids are naturally sort of fearful of the unknown, right? And rightfully so. The unknown's a scary thing, and it can be full of monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So what you can do is you can expose them to little bits of danger that are digestible over a period of time, and that makes them anti-fragile. If you try and protect them too much, then
they have no immunity. They won't be able to handle stress.
right. And then let's look at what happens, right? So we have a culture that for the last 2 generations has kept people protected from ideas that are dangerous. And when those ideas rear their head, people don't know how to deal with them. And so,
of an idea that's like that.
Nazism,
You're saying
white supremacy.
We didn't talk about it for a long time, and that's
well, we said it was gone when it wasn't, right? And so, like, when examples present themselves, we have this break in our brain where we're like, this white supremacist thing is happening, but white supremacism is gone. So which is it? And then, and they have a lot of, so they start justifying, and then they start reading up. But if they're not mentally
ready to deal with ideas and think critically, then
they'll just absorb it, right? And they're like a sponge for bad ideas.
So I'm hearing you say community is important, critical thinking is important.
Yes.
Being able to understand the dark side and to face it and to choose good despite is important. Dialogue is important.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
I think community is part of all of those things. I think community is like the keystone of all of it. Because if you have people around you that you trust, they'll tell you when you're doing the wrong thing.
Okay.
They'll keep you on an even keel, and you can do the same for them, right? Like, I have a really strong community of people around me that I trust, that have a good moral compass, and we've all faced our dark side. So when I see someone, like I have friends that have a temper, right? And I don't want them to lose their temper. I just want to make sure that when they're angry, it's for good cause. You don't get angry at the wrong shit, or you don't. But the thing is, those people with a temper, they have a tendency to kind of fly off the handle and assume things when it's not necessarily the case. And so I can come in as this sort of sober third party and go, well, I don't think that was the intent. I think maybe if you look at it this way, and they can be like, yeah, maybe you're right. And I need that too. I have a temper. So I have people who do that for me as well.
That's big. That's big. Okay, I'm going to check a comment from Kevin. He says, Americans want to have their cake and eat it too. They want freedom and justice for all, but they don't want to give up the system, which is inherently unjust.
Right. And that's part of the deeper conversation that we need to have, right? Is like what I was saying about the difference between theory and practice. They want to have freedom in theory, but they don't want to do the work. Because freedom is something you have to work at.
Okay.
Right? So you don't get it. Like that old saying, freedom ain't free. You got to earn it. You got to earn it every day.
How do you earn freedom?
By acting in the best interest of your community. If the people around you are safe and secure and free, then so are you.
So this would mean healthcare, education?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It means that many hands make light work. And if you want to be the boss, you want to take full credit for everything, you're going to be tired because there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So before we close, is there anything you want to close with or say to the streets, talk to the world? What's your...
I feel pretty good about this so far. We didn't even touch on the empire. We got to the point where it became an empire. So there's a lot more to go. But the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because we're at that pivotal moment, and I want people to understand that the stuff I haven't talked about is when the real horrific stuff starts.
Horrific?
Yeah, things get real bad.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's a okay.
Much. Wow. I mean, there's highs and lows, right? Wow. Like any culture, there's highs and lows.
I'm trying to get this cycle of despotic, oppressive empire going up and down. I'm trying to get off of that.
Yes.
I wanted a new paradigm. I want to be.
Yes. But that's going to require a lot more community engagement. And I think the best thing we can do is try and build something that is sustainable with or without the assistance of the system.
Okay, and the system, you mean the government? Or what do you mean by the system?
Yeah, I do. I mean the government. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. If the water gets shut off, what are you going to do?
It's done. I'm
Right,
done. I mean, I'm done. What am I gonna do? It's over. Game over.
right.
Real talk.
So we need to think about that.
I mean, sometimes you're a fish you're a goldfish in a glass bowl, and you say, "Yo, if this goldfish," I really I thought about it as being like a city dweller or whatever.
Yeah.
If the power cuts off and there's no more water and shit, or like if we don't have refrigeration or the grocery store closes, it's lights out.
So I've got a plan.
What's up? What you got? You got
I got people. I got people.
I need some people. Damn. But
We all need some people.
yeah, but at this point in my life, I'm not really too concerned about my individual survival. Like it is what it is.
Yeah, totally.
I'm trying to spend my energy on hoping to get some kind of systemic change, but
Yep.
yeah, but I yeah. Okay, Evelyn says this for you. That's
Thank you
nice,
so much.
right? You see his smile right there? That was, you made him smile. Okay.
Yeah, I wish it worries me
Yeah,
that that's the case.
I can feel that. And Iman says, I'm thinking this: you earn your freedom by having uncomfortable conversations with your family and friends, challenging your work policies, supporting the community through funding or lending a hand, being environmentally conscious, meaning you might have to drop your favorite brands or capitalistic hobbies.
Yes.
Yeah, I go ahead.
No, you go ahead, man. You go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I think a part of community is behaving in such a manner that you'd want your entire community to also behave in. So if there's things happening in your world that you deplore, or you think, oh, the world would be a better place if this wasn't happening, then you need to stop doing those things. Like, you know what I mean? And so, like, not be a hypocrite. And that
it's the follow through, right?
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, anybody can say some shit or like believe in some shit, and that like we were talking about this before we went live, right? Like I was saying how like my experience with the G20, there was all this outrage and then it was gone. And then the 10-year anniversary comes up and there's all this outrage and then it's gone. And it's like same thing all the time. And BLM is a very similar situation. There's people on the ground in the struggle every single day. They're fighting it all the time.
6 years.
But you don't hear about it when it's happening. You only hear about it when it flares up in the violence, right? And like we need to, like, we have the capacity, we have the ability to engage directly with these things on a daily basis and like make efforts to genuinely change our material conditions. But we can't do it alone, and we can't do it as long as we're doing it within the avenues that are offered to us.
That's interesting.
Because they're going to lead to the same thing every single time.
So what are different avenues?
Well, I mean, the way I did it was getting out of my neighborhood, getting out of my comfort zone and my cultural norm, and exploring other ideas and other societies and other cultures. I did that at first through philosophy and history, and then I started hanging out with people from other places and other backgrounds.
So you challenged the status quo and you expanded your we.
Yes, I expanded my we. That's exactly it. Yeah. Because, you know, like the more I studied European history, the more I realized these guys have no good ideas, man. Like most of the good ideas came from other people. And like, I don't necessarily think that we're going to find a lot from just reading European history. Look, don't get me wrong. Some cool shit happened. They had some good moments. It's a big ass planet. And it's a really small place.
That's deep.
You know, like, why do we keep talking about them all the goddamn time? Like, lots of shit happened in Africa. We can talk about Genghis Khan for days, man. That guy almost collapsed Europe.
He was, he had
nuts, man.
Yeah. Okay.
But I spent like 3 days on Genghis Khan in history class. Like, what? You know, none of that makes any sense to me.
Okay, I like that. I maybe I'll end there. Kevin says, I don't think anyone in the discussion behaves in a way other than community first. I mean, I could do better. I mean,
I think we could all do better. Yeah.
yeah, like what did she say? She said about dropping my favorite brands and my capital. I could do better. Yeah, I'm working on
Sure.
it. The more I talk all this shit on the internet, the more I realize I could probably do better. So I'm gonna say that I mean, yeah, I'm not always community first. I'm trying to be better, but I'm working on it.
But in a lot of ways, you're doing the thing that I was talking about, right? Like you're getting out of your comfort zone, you're having conversations, difficult conversations with people, and you're like you told me, like you come up with a topic every day, right? And you just like you learn about it, and then you riff on it, and you talk about it, and you get out in public, and you make it real,
I'm
and
trying.
that's going to change you.
It's
That's going
yeah,
to
I'm different. I feel different
yeah,
already. Yeah.
right. So that's how
Yeah.
it happens, man.
Okay. So this is a Wakanda hug,
And I mean, this is changing me too, right?
right?
Like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is this is good for me. That's why I wanted to do this. Is like by talking this out, I get better ideas.
We're gonna have at least two more conversations. So
Done.
yeah, okay. So Wakanda hug, everybody, peace up. I no wait, hold on. Evelyn says I'm a manager of an RV park, long-term park. My intent was having community. It's hard as hell, but then then these are people not necessarily brought together with a common theme, but I still feel that people here feel at least safe. You mean the people in this conversation feel safe, or you mean in the
I think she
RV?
means the people in her park.
So you keep them safe. Safety
But
is
we
a
don't.
thing. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and also we don't always get to choose the people in our community, right?
Wow. Talk about that. We're not done yet. Say something about that.
Sure, man.
That's hot. I'm
Well, I
awake
mean,
again.
how did we reacquaint ourselves? Like I met you at York University during my Frosh week,
Very true.
second year, and
Yeah,
you were just the guy with the microphone.
that's
And
me.
I remember thinking, this guy is cool. I definitely want to keep him in my on my radar. Like I had this vibe, man. I can't explain it, but like it happens right here. Like I feel it right here. And like when I meet somebody cool, I'm like, keep an eye on that person, keep them in your circle, right? And you were one of those people. I just remember getting a good vibe off you and thinking, I want to keep this guy close.
You know what I told myself when I was doing all that York shit, especially at
So
Founders? I told myself that everybody in my college, I was president, everyone in my college were a part of my tribe, and I was chief, and I had to take
that's
care of
how it
everybody.
felt.
I didn't,
That's how it
and
felt.
that's so I was on a microphone, but really in my heart, I was like, this is my tribe. I gotta take care of them. That was my mindset, period. And
That was the
every
that was the first time that I'd met somebody in you because my first year was at Western,
okay,
and it was not friendly. You know, it's a very elitist school. A lot of rich kids, and I come from a poor background, so I just didn't make any friends, and I was living off campus and working full time while I was in school, and it was weird. And then when I got to second year, when I did Frosh Week, I met you, and I met all the other people that were part of the founders team,
yeah,
and I was like, these people are cool, man. These people understand family. They want to make school an enjoyable environment. They want to like help me thrive as a person.
yeah,
And I could tell that you were one of the main architects of that attitude.
yeah, because
You know what I mean?
they didn't they I got elected to that position, but I wasn't the first choice. So there was a clique, there was a founders elitist clique, and
As always.
they brought me in as an outsider, as like a substitution. And instead of me working with them closely, I brought in my best friends. So it's me and my best friends now, and we have to organize a program for a bunch of people from all over the world and a lot of white people that we never met before. So
Yep.
our energy was just like, let's make it inclusive. That was because
So
so all the inside jokes from the past that they used to do and all that other shit that was cliquey was gone. We brought a new culture, and that culture was totally inclusive because they brought in a new person, and that's kind of how you felt so comfortable because we
so
were
what
just
you're saying is there was a thesis, and then they brought in an antithesis,
like
and a synthesis happened.
that's right. Because I had to keep the old guard happy, all the people who I had to
That's
keep all
right.
the yeah, but yeah,
You got to
but
keep a little bit of the past,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just so
So
people feel comfortable.
I was trying to build community, but yeah,
It felt that way. But
cool.
like
And
what I'm saying is like it was very humble beginnings, right? And like I was far less comfortable in a conversation back then. I was far more introverted. And so
uh,
like I didn't really connect with you, but I knew that you were cool and I wanted to keep you like
yeah,
keep you in my orbit. I wanted to keep an eye on you. And then that was the year that Facebook kind of became a thing.
yeah,
So I connected with all the people from university on Facebook like right away. We were all on our friends list because it was like that's all we had. It was just the people
mhm,
we knew in university. And then, fast forward, that was what, like 12 years ago, 13
yeah,
years ago, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah. And here we are,
yeah.
like we didn't choose that moment.
No,
I didn't really choose York. It was just the school that picked me,
I hear you.
but
Yeah.
it worked out,
Yeah.
So like the community that we have around us, like we might be frustrated with them sometimes, but like what I like to do is like, especially in my like immediate neighborhood, like the people that live next to me and stuff, is like I got a lot of elderly people around, so I feel like I need to kind of take initiative with stuff and like help
Okay.
out as much as I can. So I shovel the sidewalk and stuff and help them out. And in return, they hook me up. They salt when they can, so I don't have to pay for salt in the winter. They kind of take care of it for me. And when something goes wrong, like someone speeds down the street or someone takes a corner too hard and something gets damaged, we all communicate and we all talk to each other. We make sure that we have our story straight and like we can deal with problems as a group. Because if it was just me and I felt like my neighbors were competitors, when something goes wrong, they're not going to give a shit.
So community takes care of each other. That's
Yeah,
what you're saying.
absolutely. And without asking too. That's the other thing.
And sometimes you don't even get to pick your community. You just have, but
Yeah.
you can still.
Dude, I'm
Okay.
surrounded by old Portuguese people. I have less in common with them than I do with anybody else.
I
But
hear you.
snow falls, sidewalks got to be covered or, like cleared.
Community.
So I got a shovel.
All right. Okay. This is the Wakanda Hug for real.
All
Peace
right.
out. Yep.
Peace, man.
Love it. Bye, everybody.